All right, everybody, we'd like to welcome you to our Sage 100 Contractor Year-End Training. My name is Troy Guevara, and I have with me today Linda Allstat. She's one of our senior Sage 100 consultants. Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Troy, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on our year-end payroll as well as general ledger closing and archiving. Some of the things that we're going to be going through today is I'm going to show you the different resources that are available for you to where you can gain further knowledge, get further information on the archiving and or closing process. We're going to talk about the difference between closing and archiving payroll. We're going to talk about advancing your fiscal year as well as archiving your general ledger data. And then we're also going to talk about some of the enhancements that have come out with the recent version 25. And we're going to follow it up with questions and answers. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to raise your hand over there on the control panel, and we will answer them as we go along. Okay, there are several areas that Sage has provided you to where you can go get additional information on a bunch of different topics, not just closing or archiving your payroll or your database, but all sorts of different topics within Sage. One of the or two of the areas are actually in your software, and I'm going to pull my software over here and show you. Oops, I don't think that's working now. Troy, is there a way you can help me figure out how to get the screen over? Worked a minute ago, but now it's not. Okay. All right, well, I apologize for the trouble we're having here, but basically, when you're in your software and you have the tabs at the top, you have a Home and Resource tab. If you click on that tab and you go to Product Documents, you'll notice there that there is a year-end guide that you can open up. And then there is also an online community. And the online community is an area within Sage that is open to users of Sage 100, where you can go in and ask a question about Sage 100. A user may answer that question for Sage 100. You can research any questions that have been asked in the past, etc. The other thing is you can schedule training with TUG. If you're not a member of TUG, I would suggest that you become a member, because again, it provides you with additional information, and they provide training classes, courses, webinars throughout the year. Right now they're doing a presentation of year-end closings as well, in addition to what we're doing here. And then you can also always go to your Sage University. So to get to TUG, you can go to tugweb.com, or to get to Sage University, you go to sageu.com. All right. So although we're on version 25 right now, I wanted to bring up version 24 because that came out last year. And a big change in version 24 is that it now allows you to have multi-year payroll databases open in your current database. So in the past, what we had to do is we had to actually archive the payroll database before we could begin processing our new year's payroll. But now we can have several years of payroll open. And one thing that's nice about that is if you do keep, several years of payroll open, let's say your company policy is to keep 2 years of historical payroll open in the current database. What's nice about that, for an example, is like your insurance audits. Typically your insurance policy period doesn't run January through December. It can run, June through July, whatever the case might be. Now we're able to run reports for that time period instead of having to go into the archive to gather information from the prior year. Now, again, if you do a close, which was available with version 24 versus an archive, it doesn't separate the database. The only time your database is separated is when you actually do an archive, and we'll talk about that. So what happens when you choose to do a close in payroll? Basically, all your year-to-date and quarter-to-date employee balances are set back to zero, so it's ready to begin the new year payroll processing, and that includes any sick and vacation year-to-date amounts. If you guys have to deal with ACA reporting, it will create the new record for you there as well. However, I know most health carriers will do that reporting for you. And of course, it advances the current year payroll. So archiving. Again, the difference between archiving and closing is I can now close, which does a soft close, which just zeroes out all my balances so that I can start processing payroll for the new year, versus archive, which means I'm taking these payroll data, all my payroll data, I'm removing it out of my operating database, and I'm moving it to an archive database. The nice thing about doing a close now is now you can wait and archive your payroll at any time you want. Say you want to do it 6 months later or 2 years later, you now have that ability to do that. And basically it will create a backup. And in the archive database, all that is in there is the data from the time you archive. So let's say you're archiving payroll 2022. It's going to take all those 2022 records, move those into the archive database, and remove them from your operating database. Okay, so we're approaching year end. Now's the time to start beginning and planning out our payroll close as well as our GL close. So we're going to talk about the payroll close first. So one thing you're going to want to do right now is decide when it is you're going to close your 2023 payroll. Because before you start processing payroll for 2024, you have to have all of 2023 done and posted. That's basically all you need to do a soft close, and then you can start processing payroll for 23 after you do that close. You want to make sure that you've issued any bonuses, reimbursements, anything related to payroll. You want to make sure that you post your final payroll for 2023. You want to make sure you run an audit. And the audit is done in the 537 screen under payroll. That's a payroll audit. If you're not already doing this on a regular basis, I suggest that you do it, whether you do it after each payroll run, or you do it monthly, or you do it quarterly. I would suggest just getting in a habit of doing it, because it's a lot easier to fix payroll errors when they're caught right away than waiting till year end and then trying to correct those errors. Now, if you do run a payroll audit and you do get audit errors, the system will allow you to still close with those audit errors. However, if you're trying to archive your database, you cannot archive until you get those audit errors resolved. The other thing you're going to want to do is update your employee statuses in your 511 employee list. So what that means is our employee statuses are quit, laid off, terminated, current, etc. So if we're going to, if we have a list of employees that we haven't been keeping up on that, we want to go through and update that list and change their statuses to what their current status is. We also want to mark any third-party retirement plan or consent for W-2s on their employee records so that when we print their W-2, those boxes are checked. We want to review any ACA information if applicable. Again, that's only if you have the Affordable Care Act that you have to comply with if your insurance company is not doing that for you. And I would also suggest that you start doing trial runs on your W-2s. Run them now. Make sure that everything is calculating correctly and everything is tying out with your 941 filings, and that there's not going to be any hiccups when you actually go to run the final W-2s. If you're not enrolled with Atrux, I suggest you get enrolled with them, and you can go to efile.atrux.com to make that enrollment. What Atrux is it's the add-on part in Sage that runs your 941 filings, your 940s, your state unemployment filings, your W-2s, your 1099s, and they do it for a really reasonable price. So it kind of takes off that burden from you having to manually go get the forms, print the forms, mail the forms. This can all be done electronically for you. But if an employee decides they want a electronic W-2, it will send that to them electronically. But if they don't want it electronically and they still want to receive a paper W-2, Atrux will also mail that paper form to the employee. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but you really are supposed to have consent from the from your employee saying that they would like to get an electronic W-2. And you can send out that consent form from the software itself. And that's going to be in the 539 HR forms. You'll scroll down till you see the electronic W-2 consent, and then you can select what employees you want to email that off to. Okay, so what happens when you're computing payroll in a multi-year environment? The critical factor is, what is the payroll check date? That's going to determine your employees' year-to-date and quarter-to-date totals. It will affect the sick and vacation hours. If you have to avoid a check with the previous year, it will update that employee's information for that year. And to compute payroll, it uses the current payroll data to calculate the rates and maximums. So what I mean by that is, typically at the beginning of the year, you're going to get notified from unemployment that your unemployment rate has changed. So we want to make sure that before we process any 2024 payroll, we go into that payroll calculation and change that rate. Now, word of caution here when you're working in a multi-year payroll environment. Say, for example, somebody lost their paycheck from 2023 and you had to go back and reissue that payroll. When you calculate that payroll, it's going to pick up that new rate for that calculation that you changed. So if for some reason you do have to go back and print a prior year paycheck, you just have to remember to go back and change that rate so that that paycheck calculates properly. Once that paycheck is reprinted, then you want to go back and change it to the current year's rate. If you need any additional information about the multi-year environment payroll, go to the release notes for version 24.2 and you can get a lot of detail there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about closing payroll versus archiving payroll. Again, like we talked about before, we want to make sure all of our payroll is done, that we've issued any reimbursements, any contributions. You know, if we haven't been keeping up on that during the year, we want to make sure we get that all taken care of. Now, in the knowledge base, and if you guys are familiar with the knowledge base, again, that can be accessed through your software, through your home and resource tab. And if you go to Sage support, you'll see a link there for the knowledge base. The knowledge base is really nice because you can pull up a lot of information on anything within Sage, and it'll give you some good guidance there as to what it is. So for example, here's my TUG, and I'm logged into TUG, and if I come over here under webinars and events, I can go to the community calendar and I can see a whole bunch of different classes that are being offered. And right now, like I said earlier, they're offering a lot of Sage 100 year-end classes. Okay, the knowledge base also will give you a good example of how do I set up a health insurance deduction, or how do I set up a vehicle reimbursement, or how do I set up a HSA contribution. So if you ever have questions on how to set up certain calculations, payroll calculations, the knowledge base is a really good place to go. So another thing, when you can go ahead and enter in the new year payroll information, like the time and the time cards and all that sort of thing, but you just cannot compute the 2024 payroll until you have actually closed 2023. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess. It's going to combine the 2023 totals with the new 2024 data, and you just don't want to go down that road. Now, if for some reason you do have audit errors, I'm going to try again and see if I can pull up my software here. Yeah. Oh, it's working now. Okay, great. If for some reason you do have audit errors, and when I talk about audit and payroll, there's two different audits. One's a GL audit, and then one's a payroll audit. So if I come down here to the payroll audit and I run an audit and I get no errors, that's great. But if I do get errors, it's going to give me a report of what those errors are. The first thing you want to do is just try repair. Repair a lot of times will fix those audit errors. After the repair, if you are still coming up with audit errors, then you're going to want to reach out to either Sage support or your Sage 100 consultant, and then they can help you get those audit errors resolved. Because again, you can go ahead and close with audit errors, but you cannot archive with audit errors. All right, so before you go ahead and close your payroll, you want to make sure you have a backup. Your backup can be done on demand through the database administrator. You could back it up to an external hard drive. However you choose to back up, you just want to make sure that you do have a good backup. And again, like I say here, if you go to the database administrator, tune up, backup, restore, you can choose backup, select the company that you want to back up, and then go ahead and back it up. Now, to close the payroll, it's a very, very simple process. Let's see. Okay, so if I'm going to close versus archive, I'm going to come into my payroll management, which is my 5.3, and then I'm going to come down to number 8, close payroll year. It's really this simple. All I have to do is click close payroll. Now, if you want more information, you can drill down to the user guide from here, but it really is that simple. So don't be afraid to just close your payroll, but again, make sure that all your 2023 payroll is finalized before you do so. When you go to close your payroll, you do have to be logged in as a company administrator or a payroll administrator if you're using that feature, but need to be logged in with admin rights. So what happens to your database or what should you do after you close your payroll? Again, like we were talking about earlier, we want to come in and we want to update our payroll calculations. So we want to do it at the employee level if that's needed. And also, one thing I do want to point out is that when you get your new payroll updates from Sage, and they typically issue those around mid-December, you're going to want to make sure you install those because those are going to install the new tax tables, any changes, whatever changes the federal government or your state government has issued for the new year. But one thing that it will not automatically update is your employer and employee Social Security. So you're going to want to go into those two calculations and update them for the new rates for 2024. So for example, Social Security for 2024 is now going to be $168,600. So let me kind of give you an example here of what I'm talking about on these payroll updates. All right, if we come into our payroll management, payroll calculations, here I'm going to come in and I'm going to select whatever payroll calculation is changed for the new year. So like for example, here's my employee Social Security. I'm now going to change that to $168,200. The rate's going to stay the same, and I'm going to save that. Now, anytime you make a change to a payroll calculation, you're going to be asked, and I'm getting a message here that I'm still in my 2023 database. I'm just going to ignore that. I'm going to say, yes, I want to save. You're going to get this message here saying, hey, make sure that you go to options and you update the rate and the max for the employee's records. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take note of what calculation I'm updating. I'm going to say, okay. I'm going to pull that calculation back up. I'm going to go to options and update employees. And I have the option of updating the employee, update the default rate and max for all employees, current employees, or just employees with this calculation. Or I can update the max only. So if only the maximum amount changed, then I'm going to select that. But if the rate has changed, I'm going to select rate and maximum. And I typically do it for current employees. Now, employees with just this calculation might be like a 401k, for example, because maybe not all employees are participating in the 401k. All right, so that's what I'm referring to when I talk about updating your payroll calculations. Same with workers' comp. If your workers' comp has changed, those rates have changed, you're going to want to get in there and change that. Same with your pay groups and pay group benefits, which pretty much just applies to anybody that's running certified payroll. So in that case, we're going to come into the 5 through 4 pay groups. If any of our classification rates have changed, we're going to change them, as well as any related benefits. We'll update those as well before we process any new payroll. And same here, like with our workers' compensation, if those rates have changed, we'll change those, but those typically aren't going to change until you renew your insurance, whatever that policy period end date is. Okay. Another thing, and you're going to update any, if you guys have any local payroll tax that you have to pay, you'd want to go in and update that as well. Now, if you're using simple time entry, you do need to come in before you process New Year payroll, and if you pay bi-weekly, you got to adjust that date. So let me give you an example of that. Okay, in the simple time entry and time entry settings, if we pay bi-weekly, I now need to come in before I process 2024 payroll and tell it what is the first period end date of the new year. Okay, that's pretty much the only thing you need to do there if you are using simple time entry.
Hey, Linda,
Yes.
can I jump in and ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, once rates/maximums are updated for 2024, will reports that are run for 2023 reflect the new rates? I think I remember that happened last year and it was confusing. Do we need to print 2023 year-end reports before updating rates/maximums?
Okay. If you're in a multi-year payroll environment and you didn't archive your payroll, I'm pretty sure that if you run a report for the date range, say you're running a report for 2023 and you've already closed 2023, we're into February of 2024. If you're running a report for that date range in 2023, you're going to get the information as it was in 2023. The only thing that would change it is if for some reason you had to recalculate something. Does that answer your question?
We'll wait and see if they respond.
Okay. But yeah, no, if you're running reports and you're telling it what date range you want to run the reports for, that's already historical data, right? So that's going to give you the information as of that date and how that payroll was computed and reported.
Yes, that was a sufficient answer. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go in and we want to update our accrued sick and vacation if you guys are tracking that. And the reason you would want to do that is if you have like a use it or lose it policy, because Sage will not clear out the accrued balances. So if we're up in here and we are in our, close out some of this stuff. You're going to go into your employee records. And you're going to go onto the compensation tab where the sick and vacation are. If you have a use it or lose it policy, you're going to want to come in and clear these out to 0, because otherwise they don't. They just keep building. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. And then also get rid of any payroll calculations that you're no longer using before you start processing the new year. You know, a lot of times you get payroll calculations set up and then for some reason you're no longer using them, or they were set up incorrectly or whatever. Clean up your database and delete those. All you have to do is pull up that payroll calculation, go to edit and delete. Okay, so once you got everything set for the new year, you know you're ready to roll. Now you can start beginning processing payroll for the new year.
Hey, Linda.
Yes.
Got another question. Somebody said, it has been our experience that if you change work comp rates, the reports reflect using the new rates.
So you're saying when you run a workers' comp report, it calculates it based off of the new rate. I have not encountered that. I would just have to take your word for it. I'm sure you're correct with that. So yeah, I'd have to look into that. That really kind of surprises me, but If that's the case and you need to retain that information, then I would say probably your best bet would be to do an archive, so that locks in those rates. Yeah, I would have to test that and see. So maybe that's something that I can follow up with you after this webinar, and we can test that and see what's going on and what might be the workaround for that. So is
Okay.
that a good enough answer for you right now?
Well, it'll have to be. We'll have to get back to this person. So
Okay.
I'll jot the name down and we'll get back to him.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so now let's say that we are ready to archive. Maybe our company policy is that we keep 2 years of payroll open in our current database in that multi-year environment. But anything prior to 2 years, we want to go ahead and archive. Or maybe we just want to archive. Maybe, you know, we're so used to just archiving payroll like we have done prior to the version 2024, and you can do that too. So again, if we choose to go ahead and archive, here's what we have to do when we archive. Again, we want to run the payroll audit and resolve any audit errors. Now, also, any versions prior to 2023 or lower, you cannot archive payroll with any uncomputed or unposted checks. So make sure you don't have any of those in the system if you're on one of these earlier versions of the software. Okay, again, payroll is now ready to archive. We completed and posted the final payroll for 2023 or whatever year you're archiving. Now, if you are doing the archive process, we suggest that you do that on your network drive and not at a local desktop station. This just helps prevent any network irregularities and just makes it a safer archive. So the step for archiving payroll. Again, you have to archive payroll before entering time cards if you're not doing the close. If you're going straight to archive, make sure you archive before processing 2024 payroll. You want to decide on your archive date now because it can take a little while to archive depending on how big your database is. And when you are archiving, you have to have exclusive access so nobody can be in the system working on it. So again, it's probably a good idea to start figuring out a date and time. Now, you can back up your data through the database administrator. And let's see if I can give you an example of that. Okay, so over here, if you're aware, if I wanted to go directly into my Sage software, I'm going to use this icon. If I want to go to my database administrator, this is how I have to get into it. And then when I log in, you see I have these different options over here. I can add, delete a company, I can tune up, backup, restore, etc. In my case right now, I want to do a backup. So I'm just going to come here. I'm going to choose backup company. I'm going to select what company I want to back up. I'm going to create the backup. And then when it's done, it'll tell me down here that it's done backing up. Okay. Okay, the second step, run your payroll audit. Make sure you don't have any audit errors. If you do have an audit error, run the repair. Your payroll audit is going to be done through the 537 screen. If I have any audit errors, I'm going to do repair. I'm going to rerun my audit. If I still have audit errors, I need to reach out to Sage support or my Sage consultant to help get those resolved. We're going to review the employee statuses. So again, on the employee record, I want to look and see what's their status. Because if I archive, then any employee with a terminated, laid off, quit status is now going to be removed from my database, my live database. Now, one way to easily do that is running the employee list. And I'm going to show you that. So if I come here into payroll reports, employee lists, and employee list again, I'm not going to put any filters in here. I just want to see all my employees and what the status of their record is. So as you can see here, here's all my employees and here's their status. So all these folks are current. Now, if I decide I need to change this, it's easy for me to just drill down on that employee. Takes me right to their employee record. And now I can switch their status to whatever it should be. And now I can come here to this guy, change his status to whatever that might be. Okay, and now if I were to refresh this report, I can see that those statuses have now been changed. An easy way to do it instead of going employee by employee on the employee screen. All right. All right, continuing with step 3, as we were talking about earlier. On the employee record, again, we want to make sure that these options down here are checked if they participate in a company retirement plan, such as a 401k, if they get any third-party sick pay, if they've consented to the electronic W-2. So we're going to want to make sure that we mark those boxes on the employee record, the 521 screen, if that applies to any of them. Now, one thing is, see if I can find that again real quick. On the Atrix, there is a section in there that we can actually send out the W-2 consent. And here, when we go into Atrix and we go to processes, forms, and packages, you'll notice down here, I have an electronic W-2 consent. I can select that. It'll give you an example of what that letter is. It'll ask the employee to sign it and send it back to you. Then you can keep that in their file. And then you mark that they have consented to an electronic W-2. Now Atrix knows to send them an electronic W-2. And I can email it to the employee, whatever I need to do. But very nice feature within Sage is this Atrix. Okay, so step 4. What we want to do before we actually archive is we want to run a set of reports because we're going to use those reports after we archive to go back into our archive database to make sure we got a nice clean archive. So one of the reports we're going to run is the check register totals. That's in the 51241 screen. We're going to run any ACH hour reports if that is applicable to you. We're going to look for any open records. We're going to go in and again, if you're in a version prior to 24, you're going to go into and do a record count. And what that means is I'm going to go into my employee records in payroll processing and payroll records. I'm going to come up to file and I'm going to do a count. And this is going to tell me how many records are in the system. You know, this is a very small database, so there's hardly anything there. But you're going to want to make note of how many records are there, because when you open up your archive database, you want to make sure that that's matching. Okay. All right, so now that we've done that, we are ready to archive the database or the payroll. And that's done again in the database administrator, where I showed you how to get to that. And what we're going to do is we're going to come into archive company data. Now you'll notice there's 2 options here. Archive the oldest fiscal year, that basically means your general ledger, or archive your payroll. So you're going to select archive your payroll. You're going to select the company that you're wanting to archive. And then you're going to enter the name of the archive database. What I always suggest is putting in, start it off with the year that you're archiving. So let's say, for example, or in this example here, we're archiving the 2017 payroll. I wouldn't call it 2017 company payroll data. I would probably call it 2017, then your company name payroll. But that's totally up to you. Then you also will notice that you have these options down here when it archives. What do you want to do with employees that have these statuses? Do you want them removed from the database or left in the database? So here we've selected remove the terminated and remove the deceased. Now, since we went through that employee list and we updated all the employee statuses accordingly, and if we're comfortable with that, then I can just go ahead and select create archive. But if I want to give one final review and I want to look at each employee before it's removed, I can select this, approve each employee's removal, and then it'll take me employee by employee, and then I can say either yes or no. Again, remember, you do have to be signed in exclusively when you're doing this, so nobody can be logged into the system. Once you do that, you just go ahead and click Create Archive, and it basically takes you through a wizard. Then after you're done going through that wizard, it takes you step by step. It tells you exactly what to do. Then the archive is now going to show up in your archive area of databases. So if you're new to Sage 100, what that means is if I go in to change my company access, you'll notice I have Show Archives. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that archive payroll database that I just created. I'm going to compare those reports that I printed prior to archiving and make sure that those reports are matching to my archive database. If for some reason it's not, what you're going to have to do is restore the payroll and then start the process all over again. All right. Now, if you choose to archive your 2023 payroll instead of just doing a payroll close, then just keep in mind that when you go to run your W-2s or any quarter 4 reports, that's going to have to be done in that archive database. The other thing that I really like to do is once I create an archive, I like to really lock it down so nobody gets in there and makes any changes to it. So some of the things that I do is I'll go into security groups and change all the rights to know. And keep in mind that if you change anything, the company administrator can always go back and rechange it. I like to rename the archive company, and I like to post or lock my posting periods. So what I'm referring to when I say that is I'm going to come into my archive database. I'm going to open it up. This is red, meaning that, hey, you're in an archive database. Be aware of that. It's like, okay, I understand that. And then when I come into utilities and company information, again, I'm going to turn this reminder off that I'm in an archive database. I'm going to come in and I'm going to change the company name here, and I'm going to probably add the year before the company name. Why do I want to do that? So let's say that I'm running reports out of the archive company and my current company, and I have these reports sitting on my desk. If they both say managed right payroll, then I don't know which one was the current year and which one was the archived year. This way, changing my company name in the archive, I can see, oh, okay, well, this right here says that it was the 2022 managed right payroll. So that's always a good practice. And then also in your company security and security groups, just go in and make sure everything is changed to no, so nobody can say delete, void, change period, or print checks. That's always a good practice. And then the other thing I like to do is lock it. So coming into our period fiscal year management, manage period availability, pull up the year that I'm wanting to lock, and then I can just come in here and lock all these statuses. I can open or I can lock them. So just go through and make sure you lock everything. And that's just further assurance that nobody's going to get into that archive database and make any changes to it. All right. All right. So what happens to the current company database data after we archive? All of the archive payroll records are now removed. They're out of your operating database, and then they're now sitting in this archive database. Same with simple time entry. If you're using simple time entry, it's going to remove all the simple time entry prior to November 1 of that archive years, and it's going to remove those employees based on the employee status that we selected. All right, so now we've archived or we've closed. Now we need to make sure we're ready to process payroll for 2024. So some of the critical things we want to make sure that we do is that we install any year-end tax updates that we receive from Sage. Again, I mentioned earlier that those are typically published around mid-December, but they can continue to send out new updates well into the new year. So just make sure you're watching for those updates and installing those updates as they come along. As we talked about earlier, we're going to want to come into our payroll calculations in the 531, and we're going to update any calculations. We're going to delete any payroll calculations that we're no longer using. Again, we're going to adjust our new rate for our state unemployment if we've been notified of that. Any changes, any pay raises, anything at all that's going to affect your payroll, you want to make sure you get that adjusted before you run the first payroll. And I talked again before about when you do make a payroll calculation, that it's going to remind you to update those employees that are affected by that calculation. Now, keep in mind also that when you make a payroll calculation, that's a global calculation to all employees, right? But you may have some employees that, let's say, for example, their 401k match might be a dollar amount. Now they've come and they said, hey, I want to increase that from $50 to $100 each paycheck. Well, that's when you're going to go into the employee record under that calculation for that employee and change it at the employee level. All right, so now we're going to talk about archiving the company. Now we're done with payroll, okay? We've either chose to close or archive. We've set ourselves up to begin preparing payroll for 2024. We're ready to roll. We're done with payroll. Biggest thing to remember is that do not calculate any payroll for 2024 until either you've closed payroll or you've archived payroll. So now let's talk about the company, basically meaning the general ledger. We're ready to archive that from 23 to 24. Again, this is a multi-year environment. I can have 5 years of my general ledger open. So let's say my company policy is to keep 2 years open. And now I'm ready to archive the year before that. So if we're in 2023, we're keeping 2 years open. I may now want to go and archive my 2021 database. Again, allow sufficient time. Depending on how big your company is, this could take quite a bit of time. And it also takes exclusive access, so nobody can be in the system while you are doing the archive. And another word of caution is don't do it from a desktop. Make sure you're working on it from the network environment. And what you need to do before you begin your archive, again, run your audit. The difference between that, again, now we're talking about just general ledger, not the payroll, is you also have an audit in the general ledger. Right here, where is it? General ledger. Oh, where'd it go? I just went blank on where the audit is. Check. Oh, I'm sorry. It's in the period fiscal year management. Here's where you're going to audit your books. Same thing as a payroll audit. You run the audit. If you don't get any audit errors, great, you're good to go. If you do get audit errors, come in and do recalculate balances. A lot of times that will fix those audit errors. After you recalculate balances, rerun your audit. If you're still getting audit errors, then you are going to have to reach out to Sage support or your Sage 100 consultant to help get those audit errors resolved. Okay, we want to verify there's no unprinted or unposted checks. We want to change the status on our jobs from maybe completed or closed so that we can move those jobs over into the archive database. Why do we want to do that? Because if we have like years and years of data in our current database and we go to run reports, it's clogging down our system. It's taking forever to run those reports. So we want to keep our current database as clean and efficient running as possible. So that's a good reason why we want to get rid of some of this stuff. And again, you can remove jobs with the status of either refused or closed. And before you do the archive, you do want to go into the posting period and verify that you're in period 12. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and archive the database. Step 1. Again, in the 1/6 period fiscal year in management, select change period and make sure you're set to period 12. So what is meant by that is 1/6 period fiscal year management. If I go to change my period, I want to make sure that my current period is in period 12. Again, you must have exclusive access, so this is a thing that you're going to want to plan out because nobody can be in the system, and you want to also make sure that you do a current backup. Again, it's good to have backups on a couple different mediums. Not only can you do the backup versus the Sage database administrator, but maybe you back it up to an external hard drive. Maybe you ask your IT to do a backup, but it's really good to just have a couple good backups to make sure you're safe. The next step is period audit errors. If you do have audit errors, like we talked about before, try to do the recalculate your balances, see if that resolves them. If you continue to have audit errors, then you're going to have to, typically it's best to reach out to customer support more than your Sage 100 consultant, because it's usually something in the background that they have to go in and fix. If you do call Sage support, they do get very, very busy at the end of the year, the beginning of the year. So you're going to want to have your company name, telephone number, the version of the software that you're on, and your Sage ID. Now, if you're not aware of this, I can show you where you can find all that information. When you're in your software, go to Home and Resources and About Sage 100. Here, it'll tell you the version of Sage that you're on, as well as what version of the payroll taxes that you're on. So in this company, my last payroll update was July 1 of 2023. My Sage version is 25.1. I know right now we're at 25.2, so I probably want to go and start getting that updated. Here I can see where my customer ID number is. They will be asking that, as well as what additional modules I may have. So if you ever have questions about, okay, what all do I have with Sage, what's my number, etc., that's where you're going to find it, instead of having to try and dig through sales documents or invoices or whatever. Again, just talked about the audit errors. Okay, so step 3, we also want to make sure that we do not have any unprinted checks. If we have unprinted checks, it's not going to let us close. So in order to determine if we have unprinted checks, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the 2.5 report printing screen, and we're going to go into report 21 general journal. Our printing criteria, we're going to select it for the entire year that we're closing, and we're going to select it for every single cash account, checking account, savings account, payroll account, whatever cash accounts you're using. You're going to select all those accounts. The transaction number is going to be 0000, because you may recall that anytime in Sage, if you go look at like a AP invoice or a paycheck, if you see the transaction number as 0000, that means that that check has not been printed. If there's a transaction number there, then that represents the check number that was printed. So we're going out and we're saying, okay, show me any checks that have a transaction number of 00 and with an amount of greater than 1 cent. So then I can preview that, and if I get any of those, then I can drill down on those records and determine what do I need to do with those. Do they need to be deleted? Do they need to be posted? Whatever. So make sure you do that. Verify your checks. And then again, on your job status removal, we talked about that earlier, that I can come, no, I'm sorry, we talked about the employee status. So here is where, before you do your archive, you're going to want to go through all your jobs and mark the statuses, right? Whether it's closed, whether it's bid, refused, contract, etc. Now, an easy way to do that in the system is come to where you set up your jobs in accounts receivable. Oops, accounts receivable. And if we go to update, you'll notice we can update the statuses to completed, or we can update the statuses to closed. So if I click update the statuses to closed, it tells you to update a closed status, select the job from the list and select insert. I'm going to say okay. Here's all my jobs. Now let's say I'm ready to go ahead and close that one, close that one. Let's say I'm going to close this one. When I've selected all my jobs that I wanted to now show as a closed status, I'm going to do insert selected items. And now those jobs have been changed from current or whatever to closed. So as long as they have a closed or completed status, or fused status, I'm sorry, they can now be removed from your database when you're archiving. All right. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention is, let's say you selected a job to close and you're in the archiving process. If a job that you selected to be closed has any open transactions associated with it, let's say it has a receivable invoice that hasn't been collected yet, or a payable invoice that hasn't been paid yet, the system will not let you close that job. In order to close a job and remove it from into the archive, there can be no open transactions on it whatsoever. But if there are any, if you select a job to be closed and there are open transactions, as you're going through the archive, the system will pop up and say, hey, we're not closing this job because of the open transactions. All right. So you want to print reports after year-end reconciliation. So again, before we do the archive, we're going to run these reports just like we ran some reports out of payroll, so that when we do our archive, we're guaranteeing that our archive was clean and complete. So we're going to run the balance sheet, the income statement, the AR aging report, as well as the AP aging report. We're going to run our job cost totals for the entire year. And if you guys are using the service receivable module, you're going to want to run your service receivable aging. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and advance the fiscal year to 2024. Again, you're going to open up the 1/6 period fiscal year in management. You're going to select change period. And when you advance it to period 1, then automatically periods 2 through 12 become available. So again, we ran our audit. We're saying here our current period is 12. And now we want to advance it to January of 2024. Once we do that, we get this message over here saying, hey, once you advance to January, then periods 2 through 12 of the new fiscal year will now be available. All right, so what happens in Sage once you advance the fiscal year? Again, the period moves from period 12 to period 1. Sage will audit your accounting records to verify that all valid balance transactions support the general ledger account balances. Now again, remember, it does not require you to archive to start creating transactions in the new year. Again, we're in a multi-year environment. I can have my general ledger open for 5 years if that's what I choose to do. I can have it open for 10 years if that's what I choose to do. So the only thing that keeps you from entering data into the new year is because you just haven't moved it from period 12 to period 1. Once you move it to period 1, actually when you move it to period 12, period 1 becomes available. Then when you move it to period 1, period 2 through 12 becomes available. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and archive the general ledger. Again, this is done in the database administrator. So when we open up the database administrator, you can see here we can archive company data. As I mentioned before, you have two options: archive the oldest fiscal year, which represents the general ledger, or archive the payroll data. Here, we're going to click Archive the oldest fiscal year. You always want to make sure that you archive the oldest fiscal year. You don't want to have, like, let's say 2020 open, and then you want to jump and you want to close 2022. You don't want to do that. You want to close the oldest year first and keep closing that oldest year. Now, typically when you select your company, the system will know what that oldest year is and generate that for you, but just verify that, make sure that is correct. All right, the next step once you do that, it opens up this wizard. And the wizard just really walks you step by step how to close out the general ledger. These are the items that it's going to that it's going to go through. It's going to tell you about before you begin, what you should do, the preparation. It'll go through some maintenance options, then it'll archive the data, and then it'll tell you when it's finished. So this is the first screen you're going to see before you begin. You can read through there, and it just kind of says, hey, this is what's going to happen. And it's going to tell you you should have 2 backups of your company data before continuing. And we talked about that, meaning 2 backups on 2 different mediums, right? So once I've read this screen, I'm ready. I can go ahead and hit next. So the third step, it's going through the preparation process. Now it'll automatically do this. It's going to go through and look at your maintenance. Once it has completed that, you're going to get a green check mark. It's going to audit the ledger. Once that's done, you're going to get a green check mark. If you have inventory, it's going to audit that. And in addition to the 2 backups we've already done, it's also going to create a backup. So once you get a green check mark on all these preparation functions, again, you hit next. Now we come to the maintenance option. Here we have some choices. It's going to ask us, what do you want to do? Do you want to remove jobs with closed or refused statuses and all of the job-related records? Do you want to remove payable or paid or void statuses with no job number? Do we want to remove service invoice? So if we're using the service receivable module, if we want to move that, then we're going to tell it, okay, what date are we going to remove those prior to? And same with any purchase orders with closed statuses and no job number. What date do we want to remove those? Now that we made our selection here, again, we're going to hit next. And now it's going to start beginning the archive. Well, step back here. Now it's going to ask you, what do you want to call your archive database? So again, I always suggest starting with the year that you're archiving and then your company name. So in this situation, it could be like 2016 sample company or whatever your company name is. Always proceed it with the year you're closing. So when you go back, it's very clear what database you're in. Once you name your company, you go ahead and select begin archiving. It's going to go through. It's going to start archiving. It may take a while, again, depending on the size of your data. And then once it's done, it will notify you that it is done. All right, so now that we have our archive, we want to go back and we want to open up that archive, right? So again, if we're looking for an archive, I'm going to go into my change company. Here's my active companies, my current companies, which can span multiple years, right? But since I just created an archive, I'm going to say show my archives. I'm going to select that archive that I just ran. And now I'm going to compare those reports that I printed prior to archive and make sure that they're matching the reports in the archive database. Another thing is I want to make sure that I am locking that archive database again so that nobody can get in there and change it. So again, in the archive database, I'm going to go to the 721 security groups. I'm going to change everything to a no. Again, company administrator can always go back and change things if they need to. I'm going to go into my company information and I'm going to change that company name. So again, if I'm running reports out of the 2 different databases, I know what report came out of what database because now I've changed that company name to be like 2023 sample company. And again, I'm going to go in and I'm going to lock the posting periods so that nobody can get in there and post anything at all. Okay, what happens to your current company after you close or you archive your general ledger? Again, or what should you do after you close? Let's go in to our vendors and let's get it cleaned up. Let's get rid of any vendors that we are no longer using. We can also make changes to our general ledger accounts at that point in time. So if we have some old GL accounts that we're no longer using, we should be able to go in there and delete those. You might need to reclassify any owner's draws or distributions if that's applicable to your company. Now, let's say, for example, you've archived a company, but now you got to go back and post something to that archived company. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go to that last year that you archived, and you're going to select the posting period to be period 0. So what I mean by that is if I come over here and I'm in my current databases, and you'll notice here that now that I'm opening up a current database, the red goes away. And let's say I have to make a journal entry, right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make my journal entry, and now I'm going to change my posting period. In this case, my most recent database is 20, so I can still go back and post to 20, and it's going to affect my 21 figures. But once I archive, like I've archived, let's say 2019, I got to post something back to 2019. I'm going to come back to 2020, and I'm going to select period 0. Okay? Now it's gone back and it's corrected my books for 2019, but it has not corrected my books for 2020. So what that means is I then have to come into my 2020 database and make that exact same journal entry to make sure that my records going forward have picked up that entry that I needed to make. Okay. All right, so that pretty much gets us through closing versus archiving payroll and archiving your general ledger or your company data. So with version 25, we're now at 25.2, which I mentioned earlier, but some of the enhancements in version 25, and again, if you go to the release notes, that can be found under when you're in your software, your home and resource tab, product documents, and release notes, it'll give you a whole list in a lot of detail of any bugs that were corrected and any version enhancements that have been made. One of the things that I love about version 25 is we now have the availability to create a positive pay file for our bank. And the other thing that I really, really love is it has the ability to where now we can import our credit card transactions from our credit card bank. This is huge. We've been asking for this for years, and we finally have it available. I tested it out the other day, and it actually works pretty darn well. So to me, that's one of the biggest ones, is along with the positive pay. And then you can just go back and open up the release notes to kind of see what are some of the other enhancements that they have done. There's been some enhancements to AR, AP, payroll, etc.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer those directly. Thank you, Linda. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Troy. Thanks everybody for attending.